Marcus Hale made his first million at 34 by doing something most people consider boring. He bought storage units, not the glamorous ones you see in the auction shows, the unglamorous ones. The units in industrial corridors on the edges of mid-sized cities in the American South, where the rent is low and the occupancy is steady, because people always need somewhere to put the things they can't let go of and can't afford to keep close. He bought 12 facilities in 4 years, automated the billing, hired one manager per 3 units, and watched the money come in the way water comes through a pipe. Not exciting, not glamorous, completely reliable. By the time he was 40, the portfolio had grown to 31 facilities across 6 states. Revenue, $11 million a year. Profit margin, 38%. He was, by any reasonable measure, a wealthy man. He had a house in Atlanta, a cabin in the mountains, a truck he had owned for 9 years and had no intention of replacing, and a savings account that most financial advisors would call excessive. He was also, around this time, beginning to understand that wealth is a strange thing, that it does not feel the way you imagine it will feel before you have it, that the first million feels electric and the second feels like confirmation, and by the 5th you have stopped feeling much of anything and started asking a question you were not expecting to ask. The question is this: how much is enough? Most people ask this question and answer it quickly, because the answer is obvious once you say it out loud. Enough is when you can stop worrying. Enough is when the bills don't keep you up. Enough is when you have options. Marcus had options. Marcus had stopped worrying. Marcus could have stopped. He did not stop. The thing about enough is that it has an enemy, and the enemy lives inside the person asking the question. It does not live in the market or in the economy or in the advice of the people around you. It lives in the part of the brain that was built over a very long evolutionary history to never be satisfied, to always scan for the next resource, to treat sufficiency as a temporary state rather than a destination. Marcus understood this intellectually. He had read the books. He knew the research on hedonic adaptation, on the plateau of happiness beyond a certain income threshold, on the diminishing returns of accumulation past the point of genuine security. He could have given a lecture on it. Understanding something and being free of it are two different things. At 41, he sold the storage portfolio for $62 million to a private equity firm from Chicago that had been circling him for 3 years. He wired the money into a brokerage account, paid the taxes, sat with what remained, and felt something he had not expected to feel. Empty, not unhappy, not ungrateful. Empty in the specific way that people feel empty when the thing they have been building toward is complete and the building has stopped and they are left alone with the result. The result was $41 million after taxes. It was more money than Marcus had grown up believing any person could legitimately accumulate. It was enough, more than enough. He gave himself 3 months. He traveled, he read. He spent time with his brother in Tennessee and his college roommate in Portland and his mother in the house in Georgia where he had grown up. He tried to feel the fullness of what he had built. He mostly felt restless. On the 91st day, he called a broker in Miami and asked about commercial real estate opportunities in the Southeast. The broker called back within the hour. The next chapter had already begun. What happened over the following decade is not a simple story of greed. It is more complicated than that and more honest. Marcus was not a villain. He was not extractive in the way that some accumulation is extractive. He did not exploit workers or cut corners on safety or engage in the financial engineering that transfers wealth from many to few through mechanisms designed to be invisible. He built things, real things, properties that housed businesses and warehouses that moved goods and office parks that employed people. But he also did something else, something quieter and more corrosive, and it happened so gradually that he did not see it until it had already shaped him into someone he would not have recognized at 34. He began to measure himself by his net worth. This sounds simple. It is not simple. When your net worth becomes the primary metric of your life, everything else reorganizes around it. Relationships are evaluated unconsciously by whether they serve the number. Time is allocated unconsciously by whether it grows the number. Decisions that should be made on the basis of values or relationships or simple human preference are made increasingly on the basis of what they will do to the number. Yet Marcus did not notice this happening because it happened slowly and because it felt at each individual step like rationality, like discipline, like the kind of clear thinking that had built everything he had. It did not feel like a distortion. It felt like focus. By 50, his net worth was $112 million. He had a property management company with 40 employees, a portfolio of commercial real estate across 7 markets, and 2 investment vehicles that held positions in 11 other companies. He also had an ex-wife he had not spoken to in 4 years, a brother who called twice a year and seemed to be waiting for something Marcus could not quite give him, and a social life that consisted almost entirely of people who wanted something from him or from whom he wanted something. He did not connect these facts, as they seemed to him to be separate categories of his life, the professional Marcus and the personal Marcus, as if a person can be divided that cleanly, as if the values that drive someone in a boardroom do not also, over time, drive them everywhere else. The pivot point, when it came, was not dramatic. There was no single catastrophe, no loss, no collapse, no moment of revelation. It was something smaller and stranger. Marcus was 52 years old and sitting in a restaurant in Nashville with a man named Roy Deacon, who was 67 and had made and lost and remade several fortunes in a career spanning 4 decades. They had been introduced by a mutual contact and were discussing a potential joint venture, a mixed-use development on the edge of Nashville's expanding footprint. Roy Deacon was by any measure a successful man, well-dressed, sharp-minded, comfortable in the way that people are comfortable who have long since stopped needing to perform comfort. And halfway through dinner, he said something that Marcus had not expected. Roy said that he had spent 30 years chasing a number, and that when he reached it, he discovered the number had been wrong. Not the amount, the concept. The idea that there was a number that would resolve something. There was not. There was only the next number. And the person who chases numbers long enough becomes, eventually, a person who cannot stop. Not because they are weak, but because the stopping mechanism has atrophied from disuse. Marcus listened to this and said the right things and finished his dinner and drove home and lay awake until 2 a.m. thinking about the stopping mechanism. Yet he thought about the storage units he had sold at 41. He thought about the 3 months he had given himself. He thought about the 91st day and the call to the Miami broker. He thought about the last 10 years and what had actually happened to him inside them. Not financially, inside. He thought about his brother, who had asked him once, 5 or 6 years ago, whether Marcus was happy. And Marcus had said yes, of course. And his brother had nodded in a way that suggested he was asking about something different from what Marcus was answering. The question of happiness is a trap when you are wealthy, because wealth insulates you from the most obvious sources of unhappiness, and leaves you alone with the subtler ones. You do not worry about rent, yet you do not worry about healthcare or retirement or whether you can give your children what they need. These are enormous things to be free of, and the freedom from them is real and should not be minimized. But they are not the whole of a life. And when the obvious sources of unhappiness are removed, you are left facing the ones that money cannot touch. The quality of your relationships, the degree to which you are known and loved for who you are rather than what you have. The question of whether you are building something that matters or simply building. Marcus had been so focused on building that he had not noticed for a very long time that he had never asked himself the second part of that question. He began asking it the year he turned 53, not publicly, not with any announcement or gesture, just internally, in the way that private people process private reckonings. He started paying attention to what actually made him feel alive, not satisfied, not successful, alive. The list was shorter than he expected, long conversations with people who were honest with him. The early morning hours in a place where it was quiet, the particular focus that came with solving a problem that was genuinely difficult. The feeling, which he had not sought in years, of being useful to someone in a way that had nothing to do with money. He did not sell everything. He did not give it all away. He did not have a conversion experience, or discover religion, or move to a farm. He is not that kind of story, and the world has enough of those stories, most of which are not entirely true. What he did was simpler and less cinematic. He stopped adding, not abruptly, gradually, the way you stop eating when you are full rather than when the plate is empty. He declined 3 acquisition opportunities that he would have pursued 2 years earlier. He promoted the person running his property management company to CEO and gave up day-to-day control. He took 4 weeks off and did not check his phone for the last 2 of them, which was the hardest thing he had done in a decade, and also the most clarifying. He called his brother, not for a reason, just to talk. His brother answered on the second ring, and they spoke for 2 hours about nothing consequential and everything important. His brother did not ask again whether Marcus was happy. He did not need to. Something in the call had answered it. He is 57 now. The portfolio still exists. The number is still large, larger than it was. Because well-structured assets grow, whether you are paying attention or not. He does not check it daily the way he once did. He checks it quarterly, the way you check something that is running correctly and does not require intervention. He spends 2 days a week working with early-stage entrepreneurs in Atlanta, not as an investor, he is careful about this distinction, but as an advisor. He sits with people who are where he was at 34 and tries to tell them the things he did not know then. Not about how to build. They mostly know how to build. About what to do when the building is going well and the question starts to form. The question is, how much is enough? He tells them to take the question seriously, not to answer it quickly, not to defer it indefinitely, but to actually sit with it, to write down what enough would look like, to be specific, not a number, a life. What does the life look like when you have enough? Who is in it? What do you do with the days? What kind of person do you want to be inside it? He tells them that the number is not the answer. The number is what you count while you are trying not to think about the answer. The answer is harder and more personal and cannot be expressed in a currency. Most of them nod and go back to building. He understands. He did the same. But sometimes one of them comes back, a year or 2 later, with a look he recognizes. The look of someone who has reached something and found it insufficient and does not yet know what to do with that information. Those are the conversations he looks forward to most, because those are the ones where something real can be said. Yeah, where the question is not theoretical, where the person across from him is genuinely asking. He does not have a complete answer. He is not sure anyone does. But he has learned at 57 that the question itself is not the problem. The problem is the years he spent not asking it. The years the number grew, while the life around it quietly, incrementally, without drama or announcement, became smaller. Wealth is not the enemy of a good life. Greed is not even the enemy of a good life, exactly. The enemy is the refusal to look up from the accumulation long enough to ask what it is for. To let the number become the answer, when the number was only ever the wrong question. Marcus Hale made his first million at 34. He made his last deliberate decision about money at 53. Everything between those 2 points was the story. Everything after is what the story was for.